Hi, welcome to my room with the view. Today I'm going to talk about food addiction. I mentioned it a little bit in my last video about anxiety when I talked about how I rely on sugar to help me get through my anxiety and how it's really bad for me. Remember that I'm only talking about these things from my point of view. I am not a doctor or a psychiatrist, so I can't give you any viewpoints on that. I'm just doing it from what I feel. Now, food addiction is real. There are those that will sit there and say, oh, you're just making an excuse to eat what you want and to do what you want and fatty put down the fork and blah, blah, blah. It's not like that. If you look at the studies, it has proven that the brain lights up and responds the exact same way to sugar and some other types of food as it does to cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, the things you normally think of when you think of addiction. Food addiction is a real, actual thing. It's not something that's an excuse. I just want to make that clear. All right. Now, having said that, I want to talk about my personal experience. I was probably about 10 or 11 years old when I finally realized that something wasn't right. I began to sneak down in the middle of the night to the refrigerator and the cabinet, and I was sneaking food. My parents didn't know about it until much later when I finally sat down and talked to my mom about it. And by that time, I was probably in my teenage years, around 15, 16. But at that point, at 10 and 11, I just knew that I couldn't let anybody know that I was eating the foods I was eating when I was eating them. So I would go down in the middle of the night when everybody else was asleep, and I would take food and I would go up to my room and I would eat it, and I would hide it in my room and eat it later. I was embarrassed and ashamed of the fact that I was eating the foods when I was eating them, and I was embarrassed and ashamed of the fact that I was eating as much as I was eating. My weight started to get worse, but nobody really said anything about it at that time. The addiction got worse as I got older, and I realized that my addiction would really rely a lot on my emotions. So I would normally be able to deal with something, and then I wouldn't need the sugar quite so much. And then my emotions would kick in, and I would start feeling depressed, or I would start feeling lonely, or I'd start feeling anxious, or I'd start feeling angry, or I'd start feeling bored. And I would suddenly decide I need sugar. That was my first thing. It's like, I gotta have some sugar. So, sugar is my obvious drug of choice, because I keep mentioning it. I do like fried foods a lot, and those kind of have the same effect sometimes, but sugar is really what gets me going. It is a thing that I turn to the most when I am having problems. And I'm an emotional eater. So, it's gotten bad enough. I mean, I mentioned in my last video about eating part of a sheet cake. But it has gotten bad enough. I didn't have any sweets in the house, and I was having such a need for sugar that I just took spoonfuls of sugar and ate it by itself with nothing else, just straight up sugar. That's a problem, obviously. There's nothing wrong with people who like to eat. I love food a lot. I like to eat. It's fun to get together with people and go out to eat. It's fun to cook. I love to cook. I love to bake. Especially, that's my thing. I love making cakes and cookies and brownies and things like that. It's not a bad thing to eat sweets occasionally. It is not a bad thing to love cooking. It's not a bad thing to love food. That's not where the addiction comes in. The addiction is where you can't live without it. I actually tried a diet one time where you had no sugar for 2 weeks. Nothing with sugar in it, no fruits, no starches, nothing, no sugar. I had withdrawal symptoms. I had the shakes. I got sick to my stomach. My body hurt. I had headaches. I wanted to snap everybody's head off. I was miserable because I was addicted to having the sugar constantly in my system. It helped me deal with stuff. So I've gotten kind of bad lately. And I've allowed myself to fall back into old habits of eating the sugar, and it's really not good for me, obviously. And I've allowed myself to get back into the habit of using food to get through things. I have a son right now who is in the military, and he's my firstborn, and he is in South Korea. It's the farthest any of my children have ever been away from me, and the longest any of my children have ever been away from me. I've been very much struggling with this. I miss him more than words can say. And then when I do get to talk to him finally, I can't find the words to say because my brain is just, there's so many things going on at one time. So I just don't feel like I'm connecting to him the way I want to. And it's kind of frustrating. So I tend to eat more sugar than I need to. I'm not coping well, and I admit that I'm not coping well. And I admit that God and I have a long way to go, and He is really patient with me, and we're working really hard. But I'm trying to get past this. I think too often I say to people, I'm addicted to sugar, and they laugh. You know, we've made it a joke where we go, hi, my name is Beth, and I'm a chocoholic, and people laugh, haha, that's funny. It's not funny anymore, and I've got to stop treating it like a joke. When you treat your addiction like a joke, whatever that addiction is, when you make it funny and you poke fun at it, you give it more power. And when it has more power, then it kind of takes you over more. If you don't treat it serious and you don't think about it and it's a really serious problem, then it becomes even more of a serious problem because you're not facing it head on and admitting, I have a problem with this. And it's kind of frustrating because if you say to someone, well, I'm an alcoholic and I can't drink alcohol, they take that serious. They don't bring alcohol into the house. They try to help you. If you say to somebody, I quit smoking, I'm addicted to nicotine, I can't smoke anymore, then they don't say, hey, here's a cigarette, let's go outside and smoke together. You will have those people who are still going to try and drag you back into that addiction because they're still in the addiction. But for the most part, people respect you. And if you say I can't drink or I can't smoke, then they listen. You've got those people who sabotage you, though, with food. And sometimes it's your loved ones because I don't think they realize that it really is a problem for you. I love my husband, but sometimes I'll say to him, I really need to stop eating sugar, and he'll bring sugar back into the house. It's for the kids. The kids will eat it. No, you don't understand. When it's in my house, I can't say no. I don't have that switch in my brain that looks at something like Little Debbie snack cake and says, I can't have that. My brain says, ooh, Little Debbie snack cakes. I almost said devil. It should be. Little devil snack cakes. That's what it is for me. It is the devil. I can't deal with it. I can't just look at it and go, oh, I don't need that. I look at it and go, mine. And then I hide it and I'll eat it. And I don't need it. So if you know somebody who says to you, hey, food is a problem for me, don't sit there in front of them and eat a dessert and go, well, it's okay if I have it. I know you can't have it, but I can do it. And don't bring stuff into the house knowing that they can't have it because you think, oh, they can just use their willpower. But when it's an addiction, the willpower is not there. That's part of the problem. Now, I know that there are people who have prayed and immediately their addictions are gone. That is a miracle that God has given to a lot of people. My husband is one of them. He was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and he gave his life over to Christ, and the addiction was gone. Now, does that mean he's never been tempted? No. He's been tempted. There are times when he and I have talked about it, and things have come up where he's been tempted, but he's been clean and sober for over 20 years now, probably close to 30 now, because we've been married almost 25 years, and he was down with drugs and alcohol before we met, so at least over 25 years, let's put it that way. And the addiction is always going to be a temptation in the back of his mind, but he hasn't fallen to it again. God took it away, and that's a miracle, and that's amazing. But for me, God hasn't decided to do that yet. And I think sometimes that God allows me to go through stuff so that I can mature and build my character, because I'm a very immature person sometimes, even though I'm almost 45. Don't tell anybody I said that. I'm still kind of immature in some ways, emotionally especially. I'm extremely immature emotionally. And so God is working on me with that. And the addiction of sugar is still a struggle for me every day. And it probably will be for the rest of my life. And with food so readily available, and there's not a stigma attached to it going into a store and buying a whole pack of candy bars as there would be for going and buying beer. You know, people look at that differently, and you can get away with it easier. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make my addiction right. It doesn't make the fact that I am so reliant on something that it takes the place of God in sometimes. Instead of going to God to deal with my problems, I'm going to an outside source of sugar. And that's wrong. And that's a problem. And that's something I have to work on. So I ask that you pray for me because I need it. You know, I'm not strong enough on my own to say no to sugar. It's my best friend sometimes, and that's not good either. So pray for me, and remember those other people that might say, yes, I have a food addiction. It's not something you're comfortable coming out with. It's not as accepted to come out and say, yeah, I'm addicted to food, because people will laugh at you, and they'll say, yeah, you're not really. You're just making it up to do what you want. I'm not making it up. I really do have a problem with sugar, and I'm really struggling with it. There are others who are like me, who are struggling with food addiction, and who are struggling every day to survive and not go back to their old habits. So keep them in your thoughts too. Give them support and be there for them, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be there for each other and build each other up and support each other. Thanks for coming to my room. Bye.